Hi, and welcome to tonight's Action Coaching Club live training call. It's Lou Dallo. Nice to have you here with me tonight. Tonight we're going to do the nuts and bolts of blogs. And generally speaking, in our vernacular, when we say nuts and bolts, we're kind of talking about looking under the hood and getting into the technology of a particular piece of software or something that we've talked about before, and we want to sort of see how it's implemented from a technology point of view. We just get straight down into the nuts and bolts. So if you're not familiar with that phrase, that's what we mean by that. I kind of took it for granted everybody knew, but then somebody once asked me, what does that mean, nuts and bolts? So I thought I'd better clarify that. So here's what I'd like to share with you today. What you'll learn today is the fastest one-click way to install WordPress blogs. We'll talk about how to configure your WordPress blogs. We'll look at themes, talk about what they are, where to find them, how to install them. Plugins, what they are, where to find them, how to install them, and also the essential plugins that I recommend you use. We'll talk a little bit about using your blog, what's a page, what's a post, and what's a category, and how to set up and use this quickly and easily. And then, of course, I mentioned this earlier in the email, we'll talk about essential SEO tactics. And I'm going to talk about what I consider to be the 80-20 approach. So in other words, many times on these calls, people say, well, I want to get free organic traffic. I want to optimize my blog so I get thousands of visitors of free traffic from the search engines. Well, nowadays in a lot of niches that we're competing for, it's not as easy as it used to be because there weren't that many people necessarily bidding for those keywords. There wasn't large competition. There weren't a lot of large corporations who are spending tens of thousands of dollars a month to optimize their SEO, and there weren't a lot of what they call content farms that are designed specifically to have writers who write SEO optimized blogs, and then they have link farms and cartwheels and all that kind of stuff. Link wheels set up everywhere, and it's really hard to compete against all those things. So the best we can do, especially when we're just starting out, to get the benefit of search engine optimization, but without doing, all of that work, is if we do 20% of the work, that'll give us 80% of the benefit. Then over time, we hope that, as we continue to put good content on and people discover our blogs and start to link back and so on, that we'll have our fair share of traffic show up from the organic search engine traffic. It isn't a strategy I would normally recommend to a lot of information marketers, especially unless you're not outsourcing it. SEO is it's a tricky, complex thing these days. I know a lot of people will say, no problem, just write a lot of stuff, keyword optimize it, and you'll be on number one on the search engine results. Well, that may be true for very obscure and unknown keywords, but that's relatively speaking going to be little or no traffic, and may or may not be qualified. So for traffic that we actually want to see, where people would come and could conceivably be very highly qualified, targeted, and maybe even ready to buy, it's a little harder than that. So I guess what I would say is it's certainly not something that you should ignore, but if you do the things that we'll talk about today, then you'll get your fair share of traffic, and you may even do very well. I have one client who does very well, gets thousands of visitors a day just by some of these techniques that we use in a fairly highly competitive field as well. So what we're going to talk about today primarily is just, how to, by the way, this is primarily for you if you're kind of a beginner and you're just getting to know the world of blogs and starting to use blogs and so on. But at the same time, some of the plugins that we're going to talk about and some of the SEO strategies will be useful for you, even if you are familiar with, WordPress and blogging and themes and so on. So hang in there. We'll get past the first part, and then hopefully the advanced section at the end will be helpful to you as well. So in case you're wondering, we recommend blogs in our, remember a couple of weeks ago we talked about the web wagon wheel, right? And at the hub of the web wagon wheel was a blog. Blogs do a lot for your web presence. It's a place where you can put a lot of content and videos and media, and you can create a lot of engagement, even a community, so that it establishes you as an authority in your field. It establishes your expertise by the content you put on there, and also it ends up creating a little bit of a community or a tribe of people that are interested in what you're doing and interested in you specifically. So not only the topic of your blog, but also the fact that it's your blog and your perspective on the topic. Now, because of the way that search engines prefer blogs, and because they typically have a lot of dynamic content and relevant content, if you set it up properly, you'll get a lot of SEO assets, search engine optimization assets. And by that I mean you'll get attention from the search engines and have a chance of some of your content showing up on the search engines, hopefully high up on the search engines. And if you do that, then you can generate free traffic. Now, free traffic is a great thing to have because nowadays, with cost per clicks going up considerably, if you're advertising for the same keyword traffic that you're getting free search engine traffic from, sometimes it literally can be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars of free traffic to you. So it's a useful thing to actually have. It does build your list if you do it properly, right? We talk about ways to build your list, and I'm going to recommend a couple of tools and a couple of methods that you should use to aggressively build your list if you're using a blog, especially if you're getting a lot of traffic. And it's a great way to engage your community. So nowadays, well, actually in the old days, as I should say, we used to have people come on, and then we would have comments and places for them to post comments on our blog and everything else. Well, now you can do that, and you can also replace the default blog comments with a Facebook plugin, so that so that anytime people do comment on your blog, well, guess what? They're also commenting on their Facebook wall, which means that all of their friends will also see the activity and maybe come visit your blog as well. And probably one of the most interesting and I think most valuable uses of the blog is that the content in your blog will pre-sell your products. So there's a couple of different kinds of blogs, of course. There's like the news and magazine blogs. There's the content farms that are designed to drive search engine traffic and make money off of advertising and all that kind of thing. But in our case, what we're looking at is we're putting in valuable content in there for two reasons. Number one, we want to attract qualified readers to the content. So if you have really good, interesting, relevant content, you're going to drive people to your blog. Now, when they're there, what we'd like to do is encourage them to join our list, and better still, if it's a really strong article and the strong article talks about a product or talks about solving a particular problem, that's a great opportunity for you to then say, by the way, I happen to solve this problem using this product or this program or this service. If you want to learn more about that, click here. And then you drive them to your product sales mini site. So you can look at the blog as being, a place of authority and content and media and engagement. But at the same time, generally speaking, we're not just a content farm. We're not like like about.com or ehow.com or maybe even easyarticles.com, where we make our money from paid advertising, from like, for example, AdSense. We make our money from selling our expertise off and the information in our products and services. So we need to create the content not just to attract search engine traffic, but then to build a case and to encourage people, inspire people, motivate them to want to join our list or buy our products. And that's what I mean by pre-selling. Okay, it does the job of educating, providing freeline content, and giving people information about our products and services so they might be inspired to invest in them. So don't underestimate the value of that, by the way. A lot of people will often say, I've got all this content on my blog and I'm getting all this traffic, but it's not making me any money. Yeah, the content does not make you any money unless it develops a desire and interest in your products and services and actually calls people to action and invites them to buy your product or service. Okay, information alone is not going to do it. You have to have persuasive information, informative information, and then a call to action. You literally do have to tell people, if you're interested, here's where to go and buy this. Okay, so think of your blog as both an education, an authority, and a content center, but then also a way to pre-sell, educate, and inform people about your products, and then make sure that you put calls to action in the articles and along the sidebars and wherever you can think of that makes sense, that doesn't seem like it's too in your face, but you want to make it available. So, for example, you think about article directories like Easy and Articles. When you post an article there, typically at the end of every article, you're going to put a resource box. And the resource box says, if you're interested to learn more about this author, click here, and then that would take them to a blog or to an opt-in page or so on. Well, so people are used to seeing that, right? They're used to seeing content and information. And very often, if you do a good job of explaining how a particular program or service solves a problem that they're trying to solve, it's kind of natural. Like when you read an article that teaches you how to solve a problem you're having, don't you naturally want to know more about resources and programs and services that are available to help you do that? Yeah, it's very typical, very common. And so you're actually doing them a service by saying, okay, here's where to go if you want to learn more about how to do what you just read about. Now, so insofar as the use of blogs, the reason they're so cool for us is because they make the process of getting online fast, easy, and inexpensive. Now, we're going to talk about WordPress today, and the reason for that is because there's a number of reasons why we recommend WordPress. It's a platform that we recommend you use primarily for your authority center. So today's call is going to be just about WordPress. Now, there are a lot of other options, for blogs and blogging platforms, services, and software. But we're going to recommend that you do this, and we'll show you the reasons why. And so today's going to be about specifically WordPress, and it's free, it's very robust, and it's well supported. So you're going to find that that's going to be very helpful for you. The great thing about a blog in general, and WordPress specifically, is that you get to fire your designer and your webmaster. This is a phrase that they use, and I kind of like it because it literally means that now you don't. In the old days, we used to have web pages online, and every time we wanted to make a change to that web page, we had to either call our webmaster and say, well, move this page over here and set up this URL over here and change this page over there, and then we had to call the designer and say, could you add an image here, could you change a table here? So you either had to become a professional webmaster designer yourself, or you had to have them on staff. Well, you still need these guys at some point, right? But for a large portion of putting content on the blog now, you don't have to know anything about HTML. You don't have to know anything about designing web pages and uploading them and FTP and cPanel and all that kind of stuff. You can just simply log into your blog, enter the post, the content that you want to appear, specify whether you want it to be a page or you want it to be a post. I'll tell you the difference in a while. And you categorize it so that WordPress can figure out what menus and what navigations it belongs to, so it reveals that information to the user at the right time, and you submit it, and you're good to go. In the old days, in fact, I remember, when I started this, maybe 7 years ago, I would go in and I would change an HTML page, and if I wanted to add a page, until I learned PHP, which is a whole other thing. I mean, who wants to learn to program PHP if you're an information marketer? You had to go in then and you had to actually change every page that was on the site to add the new navigation menu element. So either that, or you had to learn how to use JavaScript or PHP, and it just got to be, a mess. Well, now all you have to do is say this content belongs on this page, or you can say this content belongs in this category of posts, and then Google worries about displaying it to the user when it's appropriate. No menu design, no navigation, no concerns. You just write content and submit it into WordPress. And the next way that it helps us is that it integrates what used to be called our brochure sites with dynamic and social content. So the brochure sites are those, 5 to 6 page websites where people put in about us, contact us, our products and services, our portfolio of products, the kind of thing that was a brochure for your company or for yourself. So typically this used to be just, static HTML pages. You would design them, you would write an About Us page, you put it online, and it stayed there. And then for a while, people would have blogs separate. They would have, their brochure sites on their top level domain, and then they would have the blog, which has dynamic content on their lower level domain, like maybe a .com/blog. Well, now you don't have to anymore. Now with the way with the facility that you have and with the advances in the technology, you can now have a single website that is both your brochure website and a site that allows the user to navigate through dynamic content. And dynamic meaning that, it's timely, you add it on a real-time basis, and, if I come to your blog today, there may be 2 or 3 new pieces of information that there weren't yesterday. So that's the dynamic part. And by the way, that's really important from a search engine optimization point of view. Google really values and rewards blogs that have a lot of new content being added on a regular basis. And so now you can do that easily and still have that kind of brochure look and feel for people who want to know about your company, your portfolio, your services, and so on. And you don't need 2 separate things. You can do it all through a single WordPress installation. I'm going to say WordPress, you can replace it with your favorite blog provider or service. Generally speaking, it's true. Any blog software that you use, you'll be able to use both the static and dynamic pages. So bottom line is, you focus on adding information and content. You don't worry about HTML design or layout. But, like any software or any kind of application that you use, even though it's easy, and once you get the hang of it, it becomes very easy to do, there are some things to know when you get started about configuring and installing and using the blog that if you know them, it's helpful because it's going to help you get the most out of it. So today is a quick start primer for exactly that. It's for optimizing the use of and the benefits of your blog. So we're going to talk about how to install it. We're going to do a quick tutorial about the basic aspects. It's not an advanced WordPress course, right? It's just about introducing you to how to configure it and what the basic elements are that you're going to use, and then we're going to talk about installing it and optimizing it for SEO. So what you learned today, you don't have to be an advanced user to do. If you work with this for a couple days, a week, a couple of weeks, you'll know everything you need to know about fully utilizing and optimizing your blog for looking great, for having a lot of functionality, and also for getting a lot of love from the search engines. So let's take a quick look at the technology. There's a couple of different versions of blog platforms, let's call it. And so one is where the blog is actually hosted for you by the provider of the blog service. So it resides on their server. This is oftentimes called software as a service. So it's blog software, but it's delivered to you as a service. You don't actually use the software on your website or on your desktop. You use the blog service from the hosting provider. Now this is turnkey for you, and if you haven't heard that expression, turnkey basically means you turn the key, open the door, walk in, everything's ready. You don't have to set anything up or install, configure. You order the service and you start to use it just like that. Now, of course, some of them have options for different kinds of features and capabilities, and they may have like a bronze, silver, gold kind of configuration, but you just have to ask for what you want, and then they do all the work to configure it and set it up and allow you to use it. And so it runs on their servers. Now, the good news with this is the supplier does all of the maintenance. They will usually make sure that they have a high-grade server so that no matter how much traffic you get, it's not going to crash. They will upgrade their blog software, so the most recent version is always available. And they will test that it's compatible with all the other features and functions that they have. And some of them will even back up your blog so that in the event of some catastrophe, you can always recover it. But at the very least, they will have what we call redundant configurations. In other words, they usually have multiple instances of your database replicated in their servers, so that should one server happen to go down, you won't lose your data. So they take care of all of the complex technology and backing it up and making sure that the software is up to date and all the rest of that. You don't have to worry about that. The other benefit of it is that you get the benefit of your content being on a site that has a high page rank and high authority. So page rank just basically means how authoritative and how important, how valuable Google, for example, perceives that website to be. So the higher the page rank, the more valuable, relevant, and authoritative Google considers that site to be. So you now have your name, your content, your media on a high page ranking site, which means that you have a pretty good chance of showing up in the search engines. The thing is, it doesn't show up for your domain, but at least you get your content showing up in the search engines. And of course, that means if your content shows up in the search engines, you're going to get search engine love, i.e. you're going to show up higher in the results pages, and then then that means traffic to your site. So this is a benefit of hosting it on someone else's servers like WordPress.com. Also, some of these things, I think Blogger does this and WordPress does this, WordPress.com, probably a lot of the services allow you to search for other blogs in that network. So now you have people who are looking, like, for example, if you're on Blogger, you could look for other blogs, other Blogger blogs that are related to the content you have. Same thing with WordPress. You can go to WordPress.com. You have a blog hosted on their platform, and so you're going to show up when people say, "Show me other WordPress blogs on WordPress.com that have this content." And so you get a little bit more visibility, a bit more exposure, and again, that can translate to traffic. Now, one of the drawbacks is that it has a closed feature set, and the expansion is somewhat limited to whatever the supplier chooses. So obviously, in order for them to control their configuration and so on, they will typically have maybe a free and then a bronze, silver, and a gold level of features and functions, and you get to choose which configuration you want. But you can't then say, "Oh, I also want it to have this feature." If there's a piece of software that does perform that functionality that you need, there's no way to augment the functionality because it's not your software. You're not involved in the upgrade. You don't have access to installing new upgrades and so on. Now, that's not typically too big an issue if you're doing things just to get a little search engine love and so on. But when you're using it for your own site, and sometimes, for example, you may want to use it as a membership site or a content management system, or maybe there's a really cool social media sharing capability that you want to use, and it's very helpful, or maybe you want to add a forum or something like that. You want to expand what your blog does for you. Well, you can't do that if if it's hosted on the servers of the provider. So if you're happy with the features and the functions and the configurations they put together, then you're good to go. Should you need more, or if you want to do something specifically for your audience that they don't provide, then of course you don't have the ability to do that. So that's probably the biggest the limitation. Actually, that, and then there's another limitation, which is all of this search engine love, all of this content, all of this SEO benefit is now under the domain of the blog provider. So in other words, typically what would happen is if I wanted to put my blog on WordPress.com, for example, there would be a URL. Let's say my blog was called Lou Dallo, and they would say loudallo.wordpress.com. So any of the content that Google discovers is going to be attributed. The page rank, the authority, the content, all of the SEO value, all the SEO equity is going to be attributed to the WordPress.com domain. Okay, that's not necessarily a bad thing because, I get the benefit from the overall page rank of WordPress.com. The problem is it's not associated with anything that I own. And so I don't get a chance to benefit personally to the extent that I would like to. So I want to own that SEO value if I can when it comes to my authority center, my main blog, and so on. The other part of it is that you don't get to brand you as well, right? Because now you're not, that's just a blog that you're using someone else's service on. You won't find people who are well-known and celebrities that typically have that typically don't have their own site, their own web domain that brands them, expands their brand. And you're going to want to do that as well. If you're an information service provider, if you're an information products provider, if you're a service provider, a thought leader, an expert, someone who wants to show up and be branded and visible and known for what you do, there is a distinct advantage to having all of this. Google always point back to your site for any content that you create there. Now, you can take the content from your blog and put it on some of the, on Blogger, on WordPress.com, on blog lines, on Squidoo, on hub pages, on all of those other things as well. You can syndicate your content a little bit, but ultimately you want all of it to sort of point back to your main site to get the most benefit from search engine point of view. Okay, and of course, there are some free options and some paid options. So WordPress.com, for example, is free for the basic functionality, but then they offer you the ability to add and expand your functionality for a premium And so, most providers will give you a free option and then something like, I'm just generically saying, bronze, silver, gold level of functionality. And in the case of WordPress, you just pay extra. It's kind of like a la carte. If you want video, you pay, $5 a month more. If you want to host on your own domain, you pay $10 a month more. If you want, if you want to, I don't know what else they have. If you want to put widgets on there or customize the look and feel of the theme, then you pay an extra $5 a month more. So, stuff like that. So WordPress is a little bit a la carte, and other companies will give you sort of the bronze, silver, gold level of functionality. So the other option is self-hosted. And what self-hosted means is that you install the blog software on your own domain and on your own web server. So you get a web hosting account, for example, at, HostGator, let's say, is the one that we normally recommend. You register your domain name from GoDaddy, and now you take the software, in this case WordPress, and you install it on your own servers. Now, the downside here is, guess who's responsible for maintaining it, right? So you get to upgrade, you get to back up, you get to maintain your blog. And so you have to also be, so it's a little bit of work. It's not a lot, but it is, something that has to be done. And you do have to be careful because whenever you upgrade, if you're using a lot of what we call plugins, which are pieces of software from other third-party providers and developers other than WordPress, then you want to make sure that they're compatible with each other every time you upgrade. So you have to do a little bit of testing. You want to make sure that you back up your WordPress blog, because if this is your authority center where everybody comes and finds you and gets to know you and read your content, you don't want that content to disappear and irrevocably. So that you want to be able to, in the case of some kind of tragic site crash or something, that you're able to recover and restore your blog without any problem. So, the downside is you have to pay attention to that or have a webmaster who'll do that for you. You also do need to be aware of server requirements and performance. So if you happen to have a lot of traffic come into your blog, then you want to be aware that, a shared server may not be enough, for example, to handle the load. You may need to upgrade to a virtual server or to a dedicated server. Now, typically speaking, unless you're getting, a lot of traffic consistently to your blog, you're probably not going to run into this problem, at least not initially. So you're generally going to be okay with getting a shared hosting account, the ones that cost between $7 and $10 a month kind of thing. That's going to probably serve you very well until you get into the, thousands of visitors a day kind of thing. And then you're going to probably find that your hosting provider will probably give you a knock on the door and go, excuse me, what are you doing? You're overusing, the amount of dedicated CPU that you have. And so you may find yourself having to upgrade. The other thing you want to be aware of is even if you're not necessarily extending beyond your limits for CPU usage on a shared hosting account, because shared hosting accounts typically have, hundreds of other websites on that server, you may find that your users have a very slow experience when they visit your site if there's a lot of users simultaneously trying to use your blog. So you need to monitor that and be aware of it. It's not a big issue, especially when you first get started, but as you start to get popular and traffic starts to show up, you may want to find yourself moving to a higher performance server. Now, the nice thing about it is that sometimes you're going to want to add a lot of different functionality to it, and you have a whole lot more flexibility to do that. So in particular, WordPress has an architecture where there are literally thousands of developers that have extended the functionality, the core functionality of WordPress. And so that you can find a way to get your WordPress blog to do just about anything you want. But just by pulling in bits and pieces of functionality from different developers. A lot of it is free. There's a repository with, I think it's like 2,000 or 3,000 different plugins right now. So that is really good. Now, of course, you have to make sure it works, and you have to, integrate it with your blog, or, ideally you'll have a webmaster doing this. But the nice thing is that you have a lot of flexibility, and then you have the ultimate flexibility. Because if you need a whole different level of functionality that doesn't exist, no one else has developed it, well, they have an open API, which means that you can hire a developer to write a plugin for you that adds the specific functionality that you want to WordPress. So you can use the WordPress engine to develop virtually any function that you want. And that's very, very handy. Now, the great thing about this, of course, is that there are a lot of WordPress developers, which means that it's not too hard to find someone to do that for you if you need it, or to maintain your blog. So you don't, if you're using another thing like Drupal or Joomla or one of these, more sophisticated or lesser known engines, a little bit more technical and so on, there's a smaller community of developers and they all charge a premium. Well, with WordPress, you'll find that even most virtual assistants can do a good job of using WordPress, changing the look and feel, adding the functionality from plugins and so on. So you're not going to pay a premium to customize, modify, enhance, and extend the capability of your blog. And that's a very convenient thing for us to have. It's a little bit like having a platform to custom design whatever you want, but it's all based on the functionality of a blog. Now, the other part of it is that as search engine optimization and traffic is now your responsibility. In other words, you're not going to have the page rank of a WordPress.com or a Blogger.com. You have to establish your own page rank. You have to establish your own backlinks. You have to get your own traffic. So that means, it means you have to work to get that, happening. But the good news is once it does, it's your search engine asset. You own all of that, all of those backlinks and all of those search engine placements and everything like that. So, it's going to be a little bit harder in the sense that you don't have your content on a high-ranking site. But remember, I did say you could syndicate your content, so you can take snippets, paragraphs, for example, excerpts from your blog, and you can put them on a number of different other blog engines as well as social media sites. I'm going to show you a tool that does that for you, in fact, so that everything points back to your blog anyway. So you're going to be able to benefit from the other hosted platforms and the other high page ranking, but you do have to do a little bit more work to make sure that you do get the search engine optimization and that you do get your traffic. Now, ultimately, the greatest thing about this, in my opinion, is it's your brand. You get to call it, ludallo.com. You get to call it mydomain.com, whatever that is. So that anybody who, any of the content that shows up in the search engines and any of the backlinks that exist on the internet, they're all coming to your domain. And that's what you want, right? That's how you're going to get the search engine, and that's how you're going to get the branding. Now, somebody comes to mydomain.com or ludallo.com, whatever, they're going to know that it's you're for real. It's not it's not a WordPress.com domain. They're going to instantly know this is your business, and so there's a huge value to that. Now, again, just like the hosted options, you may find that you may find free versions and paid versions of blogging platforms, and in our case, of self-hosted blogs. And in our case, WordPress, in fact, is free. And most of the plugins and the themes are free, but there are also plugins and themes that you can pay for. Okay, but you can do a lot with the free stuff. So as I mentioned before, from our point of view, our recommended blog platform is a self-hosted WordPress blog. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this, and not the least of which it's, we've already talked about some of the benefits, but this is just the one that has the best of all the benefits above, right? So, first of all, I like the idea of all the search engine optimization, all the search engine and web equity belonging to me, my domain. It's really easy to install. Most hosting accounts automate the installation of WordPress. It's open source, and there are a lot, like literally thousands, of themes which change the way your blog looks, and plugins which adds to the functionality of your basic blog, and they all are generally well supported, although it's an open source community, so it's usually support by forums. It's not like you can call an 800 number and get a person on there, but if you're willing to do that, it's generally well supported. It's a really thriving community. There are a lot of developers in it, engaged. The WordPress core itself is being continuously improved and developed. It's really popular. It's used in a lot of major websites, large, high traffic, high volume, high visibility websites. I think New York Times is one of them. There's celebrities that use it. So there's a lot of momentum there, and there's a lot of impetus for WordPress to continue to develop it. And they do. They do a great job of supporting and developing it. They are funded, so it's not like it's somebody sitting in the basement of their house developing the WordPress platform. This is a well-known, this is an industry standard company that's fully supported by the community, by a lot of companies, and they've raised money, a lot of money, to continue to stay in business. So it's like a real company, except they make money on other stuff, not on their WordPress engine, but their WordPress engine allows them to make money on the other stuff. So everybody wins. And it's open source, which means that anybody can add functionality to it. It's as flexible as can be. You can get it to do just about anything, whether it's, media, whether it's videos, whether it's magazine style, whether it's blog style, personal journals, content management systems, forums, databases, communities, it's doing everything nowadays. So there's very little. I'd be surprised if you can find a use for your website. Stores, it also does stores. It's used for affiliate tracking. It's used for content farms, article directories, just about any use that you're going to have for it, you'll be able to do. It is easy to install and back up and maintain and upgrade, but it is an effort. It's easy to do, but it is something that you want to do, or at least pay someone to do. And you'll typically find that if you hire somebody, installing it is only like $10-20 because it's really easy. In fact, I'm going to show you how to do it without needing anybody to install it. But whenever you upgrade or change the theme or add functionality to it, it's and backing it up usually is going to take somewhere between $50 and $100 a month generally to have somebody doing that for you. It is easy to use once you learn it. You're basically just adding content. You just have to log in, you add content, you do a little SEO, which I'll show you how to do. You assign the category that the content belongs to, and you basically send it off, and it's done. Everything else is magic. Now, the great thing about this, too, is that there's a lot of expertise. Because it is such a popular blog of platform, a lot of freelancers that you're going to want to hire if you want somebody to help you, to outsource freelance or maybe get a webmaster or a designer. Most of them are familiar with the platform. Even virtual assistants, most of them are familiar with the platform. So if you want your virtual assistant to go in and add your content or, change the look and feel or add a theme or whatever else, a lot of them are going to be able to do that. So you're not paying for premium expertise. So outsourcing becomes a whole lot easier for this as well. Okay, so if you haven't already, and by the way, again, this is not the only choice, but it's the one that we recommend you use, especially if you haven't started yet with a website presence. This is a great way to go. If you have started with another blog and you've got a lot of stuff invested and it's working for you, no problem, continue to use it. But this is the one that we think is going to serve you best overall. From a site point of view, from a search engine point of view, support point of view, flexibility point of view, and also from an ease point of view. And it's one of the platforms that Google happens to really recognize and love, almost better than their Blogger platform, which, if they're completely independent, if they're completely unbiased, you'll find that their attention to WordPress blogs is actually higher than their attention to Blogger blogs. So if you're not familiar with WordPress, what I recommend you do is take a look at some of their community links. So WordPress.com is if you want to host your blog on WordPress. And you want to put content on there, then you open up an account at WordPress.com, and then you can create blogs that will be subdomains, like it'll be blog1.wordpress.com, blog2.wordpress.com, and so on. And it's entirely free, hosted by WordPress, and you can get started right away. And they do have the option for you to later assign your domain name to that content if you want to. It's an additional $8 a month or something like that. But it's a fast, easy way to get started, especially if you're not technically inclined and maybe you don't have a web host and a domain yet. So, this might be an option for you. Now, WordPress.org, on the other hand, is where the self-hosted community shows up. That's where all the open source code is. You can download, you can get your themes, your plugins, your documentation, and so on for the software that you install on your domain. Okay, so if you want to look at themes and plugins, etc., these are the things that extend the look and feel, change the look and feel, extend the functionality of WordPress. The link is wordpress.org/extend. And if you want to get support through the forums, wordpress.org/support. One thing that a lot of people don't refer to is the WordPress documentation. It's amazingly good, and it is anywhere from real simple getting started stuff to how to code inside of WordPress. I mean, it's really excellent documentation. So don't feel like you have to go out and buy a course, pay $200, $300, $400 for a WordPress course. Do this first. Go to the documentation. You'll be amazed how clear, simple, and complete that documentation is. Okay, and the link is codex.wordpress.org. Now, there are also a lot of plugins and a lot of different ways to make sure that your content gets pinged, they call it. In other words, the rest of the world is notified when you add new content. And people have all sorts of fancy ways of doing this, but there is actually a list of URLs that you need to ping that you can just go straight to this link here that you see and just copy and paste it into your WordPress administration. I'll show you how to do that in a second, and you're going to be covered. Most of your content now is going to be, every time you submit it and you put it online, WordPress will notify all of these different sites that, like Technorati and Blog Search and Ping.fm and all of these sites that basically tell each other and tell the world that your content is now available. So this is, by the way, why you want to have regular content going out, right? So that the world is notified on a regular basis that you're adding more and more content to your blog. And if you want to know about all things WordPress from a video point of view, go to wordpress.tv. A lot of great beginner tutorials on there as well. So they have things for the developer community there, for the guys who like to, develop software and hang out and code stuff. But there's also kind of a user end where there's some quick, simple 2-3 minute tutorials that'll teach you to do everything you need to do in WordPress. And the cool thing about this, a lot of people will go and get this stuff off of YouTube, but that's not YouTube. I mean, generally speaking, it's okay, but you don't know how old the video is on YouTube. You don't know if it's relevant to the current release of WordPress, and you don't really know who it is that's creating the video. So you can just go to wordpress.tv. You get it straight from the horse's mouth, the best, most reliable, most recent information.